Okay, we did this scene yesterday, a scrap to scene, um, composition and experiment, etc., etc. Okay, now we have another piece of paper right here. This one's matte, and it's two Seaside Coves, and it was a demonstration or an experiment on whether or not we can get some good impressions, using a brayer and putting the stamp directly onto the piece of paper, or maybe it was paper to stamp, I don't recall. But here we have kind of a slightly blurred impression of the Seaside Cove up here, okay, or down here, and a real clean impression right here. But here we have a piece that's an otherwise, would normally be just a scrap paper, and I wouldn't really be doing anything with this, but for the sake of this, scrap to scene type of video, I thought we would do something with this. Now, naturally, this is not going to be some sort of, I don't know, real traditional style of scene here. We have these two Seaside Coves mirrored against one another, so we're going to go for something probably abstract, I mean, I could cut these down, okay, and we could use these as cards right here. I can cut a 4x6 out of it, but let's just play around and see what can be done with something like this. And I'll show you how these different types of techniques, I mean, they're applicable to just about anything. You can come up with whatever using Stampscape stamps. That's what I believe, and that's the way these stamps have been drawn, okay? So, this is not probably not going to be the composition for everyone, but let's just have a go here. Now, I was thinking about using some clouds in here, similar to something like this, and I think the light beams could, provide something pretty dynamic here. I'm working around these two impressions in black, so I'm going to go with the black cloud right here. Okay, I'm going to try to really darken the perimeter here, so I need an impression of the cloud that's going to be able to hold up against those darker values that are going to be applied. I don't want this scene to take forever either. Large stamps, large compositions, 8.5 by 11 in this case, can potentially take a long time, just because the sheer amount of area that we're going to have to cover, using whatever types of techniques we choose to apply to it. So, just going dark, hey, it makes it really easy in terms of, potential quick application. Okay, so I have this perimeter of clouds going around here. It's using the cloud Cumulus again, all right? And I have something in mind. We'll see if it comes into play or not. There's going to be, I'm guessing, some changes that take place. I'm going to mask off, but I'm going to leave about, it's about a 1/4 inch maybe of that cove showing, okay? So I'm not masking directly up to it. Maybe I might even go a little bit more, okay? Maybe that's more of a 1/4 inch there. So that when I stamp this down, okay, in the middle there won't be this big gap in between the cloud and cove. I think maybe I can go in a little bit more. Just depends how thick your paper is, your masking paper, right? Okay, let me go for a little bit of a lighter impression. And I'm going to build it from that direction, and I'll go this direction. We're going to have this real centralized type of visual happening in the middle here. And that will be our source of light, okay? Something real kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't call it abstract, but maybe more surreal, okay? See what we're going with right here? Really super busy because of all the textures that we're running throughout this piece right here. Okay, now one of the combinations I found that works really easy yesterday was I just used 2 different blues, okay, and that's going to expedite the process. And one of the things, my applicator that did a terrific job with it, just this old, super gross looking kitchen sponge, okay? And it just comes to show you that, you know, certain types of applicators with certain types of properties, in this case, an absorbent property, right? Sponge. I'm not using the scouring side of this, but the, you know, just the softer sponge side of this. Sponge is going to be the thing that we're going to use. I didn't wash this off right here, so that it has a lot of black in it, so I'll just use this other side of it. This is really crusty, so I'm adding some, you know, just standard tap water to it to get that soft enough to apply, hopefully, a nice soft application of the ink. A smooth application as opposed to a real crusty one, right? And having that little bit of water in there will help to spread the ink out quickly. We have a Memento Bahama Blue here. You can use a distress ink, whatever. I would recommend kind of a lighter, medium light tone maybe, and that's what this Bahama Blue is. It's going to be a little bit lighter now because this is going to be diluted. This ink's going to be diluted with that water that I just added in here. Okay, but that's just to get it started, okay? All right, so here's my theory right here. Okay, I'll try to put some striations into this water's surface, and same thing up here. And I'll largely go dark around here, but I may choose to retain some of the lighter areas of some of these clouds, just for a little bit of variation, okay? But again, I don't want to make this a super long process right here. This is, you know, my idea for this one is, you know, to, you know, kind of expedite this entire process right here. Just, you know, it's just to kind of see what we can do with something like this. Now, I don't think I would ever, I don't know, I wouldn't say never, but I probably wouldn't be doing this composition normally. You know, I wouldn't conceive of a composition like this. I'm just kind of coming up with this composition, you know, out of, yeah, it's almost necessity, but just to make do with an existing kind of format of those two Seaside Coves. So, I don't know, maybe we can have some fun with it, right? Okay. Okay, now remember what I was mentioning on the striations, kind of, you know, the water's surface tends to, you know, have these horizontal striations of the water with how light affects the, or reflective light affects the surface. Okay. And by kind of oscillating the light on there, it creates variation, and variation is where you can get potential richness within a given space, okay? If everything's kind of more mono value, I don't know. It has a different spirit to it, okay? All right, so kind of adding it around this corner. This is largely kind of filled in right now, right? Let's go with a little bit of masking here. Let's get some of that surface right there a little bit darker on the horizon. And I kind of hesitate to call it the horizon because there's two of these ocean stamps right next to each other. Okay, it's an ocean, could be a lake too. You know, if you put trees on the other side of it. Okay. See how that opening's in there? It's like a different dimension or something. All right, let's build up a little bit more tone on the perimeter here. See, as I have little spots of kind of lightness, you know, throughout the piece, okay? And of course it's light right in there. Let's go ahead and put a little bit of tone in there, though. I might, let's see. I might use a lighter color in there, just, you know, so I don't get a medium blue right in the lightest area of that. All right, now this is a really large scene, and I'm not getting, this is not, you know, I'm not getting this kind of fine-tuned application, you know, detailed application of this color, but we can't say that we don't have anything to color a scene with, you know, when you can use like the worst, you know, sponge in the cupboard. You also wad up a paper towel too. Paper towels work fantastic for this color application purpose. Any type of kind of absorbent material that's also going to transfer the ink. I find some of the kind of poly types of materials a little bit too absorbent, or they just don't absorb, you know, because they're kind of designed, if it's in like outdoor clothes, it's designed to wick moisture. So I find kind of the natural materials and fibers to work, at least at this point in time, a little bit better than synthetics. So I don't know if that's true for everything. I haven't experimented, you know, with 20 different fabrics or anything like that, and I never will. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so just building this up. Remember, it was kind of a diluted version of this to begin with. And as I start to use this more and more, it becomes a little bit more direct intensity using that ink. But I think that's as good as it's going to get with that ink. I just added a little bit of water to this one to reconstitute some of that ink that was on here from yesterday. There's going to be some black on there, but I'm going to use my Prussian blue now, okay? That looks really dark, but it is blue. Just any kind of navy blue that you might have. There's a Danube blue from Memento. It's not nearly as dark as Prussian blue, but if you have some of the old Adirondack pads, denim was fantastic for that. A real dark color. Blueprint Sketch is a pretty dark one from Distress. It seems to have a little bit of different chemistry to it, so be careful if you're using that one. It's like really stains really fast. But it is dark and really, it's a beautiful blue. I would use that, but I don't know. I just happen to have this one in pad form, so it's just faster for me to do. A little bit of a different type of surface quality, okay? Remember, this is not glossy. It has a sheen to it. It's more of a dull, kind of more satin than a, you know, a pure matte paper here, okay? In fact, it's called dull, you know, as opposed to matte or glossy. So it's somewhere in between. This one's an Appleton Papers one. Don't get too caught up in papers. You know, there are certain ones that, you know, certainly work, but it doesn't mean that there's, you know, not 20 other brands that are, you know, similar. This was not tested at all. I just went in the store, kind of felt it with my finger and hand. I liked the surface. I bought a ream of it way back when. They're since out of business, but it's not like, oh my god, I can't do that now because I don't have Apple Paperton, you know, dull. It's called Utopia. Kind of a cool name. Okay. You can see this kind of build-up here. Use different types of strokes with whatever applicator you're using. You know, tapping, swiping. Okay, really building up the perimeter. It's still fairly light, a light version of the Prussian blue because it is, like I said, it's diluted on this spot. Look at this applicator right here, how tattered it is. Doing this scene is not doing it to this pad. This was an old kitchen spun that we were ready to toss out, and I thought, oh, don't toss it out. Let me grab that and use it. But it was literally, it was it was designated for the trash just because it was so shredded at this point in time. Okay. I'm going to darken this in a little bit. I have some plans for this kind of inner area here. Now we're applying quite a bit of tone on here, but the biggest change is, I think, well, maybe it's not the biggest change. Maybe that's the incorrect description, inaccurate. The biggest kind of unifying element will be when you bring in the same color that you stamped your imagery in, okay? In this way, in case it happens to be black. Okay, now this impression right here of the Seaside Cove, it wasn't too crisp because, you know, we were doing this experiment. I think I, brayered my rubber, dye onto the paper a little bit too hard, and it was kind of shifting around a little bit. But this just comes to show you, I mean, I can barely tell the difference between this one. This one was the blurrier one, and this one right here, which is the real crisp one. By the time you run in some inks, and not all Seaside Coves are going to be like this color either, right? You use different colors and whatnot. But, your impressions, I mean, naturally you go for the, the crispest impressions that you can get, or try to go for that. But if you don't get them, by the time you run all your colors and, inking and toning and lighting, I'm switching to the black, by the way, here. I wouldn't say it doesn't matter, but it matters far less than you think. There's all kinds of things that happen within, the process of creating a scene and applying all your tones on there. A lot of things that happen early on and whatnot. You can work with, you can work around, you can subdue, you might be able to even enhance, When you subdue something within your scene, things that hasn't been done with are kind of enhanced a little bit in terms of the direction of the viewer's attention. You darken up something over here, something else, by contrast, becomes lighter. Not physically lighter, but just in terms of attention. Starting to get like crumbs all over, and it's just because of this shredded, applicator, ink applicator. Seem a little bit kind of abstract to you? Or surreal, maybe? I always like those types of surreal types of paintings. I wasn't a big fan of it, but I always thought they were pretty cool to look at. You know, of course, Salvador Dali is like the, you know, the most probably famous of the surrealists. If something was done kind of optically, you know, I was probably more interested in that. Something like an M.C. Escher or something. Maybe, you know. Okay. Kind of reiterating that horizon. Okay. Okay. I guess in this case, this is really working really well in terms of a, you know, a wide amount of coverage. If you have a big scene and you're just kind of doing something uniformly applied in terms of a medium like this black, and this is a pretty good tool for that, as opposed to a smaller like stylus tool or something. Okay, so I'm just trying to get a big slathering of ink around the perimeter, of black ink around the perimeter. There were some really hard lines in this format here with the two Seaside Coves, so kind of adding this down, you know, a really strong vignette around the perimeter is kind of breaking up that, kind of this real outlined, linear, linear kind of conflict. That's not the right word, but this linear dynamic that I think kind of interferes with some sort of kind of visual harmony in here. So you see this where you know, this is more of this roundish type of thing. Like here, it's almost like an 8, you know, that comes in here like this. Okay. I feel that's a little bit more, I don't know, there's a lot more gesture to it, you know, with curves like that. You know, kind of within the structure of this, you know, rectangular format that we're always having to work with. You know, unless you're working with, you know, some sort of die cut, you know, surface. Okay. But there's a lot of ink on here. Okay, now I think I can wake this up a little bit. Let's go to some of this Caribbean blue. I like it. I think it's has a nice... Boy, there's a lot of crumbs everywhere. I'm going to have to vacuum my surface right here. This Caribbean blue has a bit of warmth to it, and let's see how that looks, okay? I was just going to go with the two blues, but yeah, this Caribbean blue is just a real fun one to use. This is a Marvy Caribbean blue. See that right there? You can see the difference between that and that down there. Or I don't know, can you? I can see it here. It's just warming it up a little bit. If you watch my video on color glows and how to achieve them, this blue has a little bit of green in it. So when we're going into this analogous color, that's a color that's next to another color, you know, in terms of visuals and artwork and color, it's a color that's next to another color on the color wheel. Blues are next to greens in one direction. And when you do that, it kind of creates this color glow, this dynamic with that. Okay. And again, this is just your common, everyday, you know, paper towel, right? You can find ink applicators, you know, are surrounding us. We're wearing an ink applicator, you know, in terms of fabrics, you know, if you have any rags or anything like that, you know, you can use something like that. You know, take advantage of everything you have. I don't know, I guess if you had like a really huge sheet, you could do that, especially if it's kind of, you know, maybe not if it's too thin, but you can certainly wad it up. Maybe an old sheet, like a cotton sheet, maybe that works even better, I don't know. All right, so we have this, whatever I don't even know what it is. But I find it kind of interesting. Let me use this applicator here for some additional color, maybe a little bit more detailed application. Not super detailed, but it's, you know, a little bit more narrow than, you know, than the kitchen sponge, at least. I'm just trying to create this little bit of a stronger horizon line. And again, it's horizon line in kind of quotes, because I don't know if it's not really horizon, because there's, you know, two of these in this case, but I don't know, just for lack of a better word, we'll still refer to it as the horizon. I guess there's just horizons. Would have been kind of interesting to do this different dynamic, to do one of these in blues maybe, and another horizon could have been in like a sunset color maybe. You know, I mean, it's too late for that, but that would have been kind of interesting, huh? That would have taken, you know, taken longer though. All right, got stronger horizons now, huh? I find it a little bit more interesting in terms of the dimensions here. All right, so that took a half an hour. And this is huge too, okay? And I feel we have some decent variation. It wasn't just taking the sponge and go like this around the whole corner like that. You know, we have our, you know, different striations throughout here. I have some, you know, in the shadows right in here. I would normally go in here and add a little bit more shading and whatnot. You know, for those fine-tuned types of shadow applications, but I'm not going to do that here. I think this is good enough as far as that point. All right, I'm going to designate a center point right here. I don't know if this is dead center in the middle of the paper, okay? All right, there's a couple little dots down there, but I'll see if I can remember that one. But I'm centralizing this in terms of this space right here, okay? And we're going to have these light beams coming out from there. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp this couple in here. I'm not sure which way, though. Maybe they'll be on the horizon like this, with these beams of light coming out from behind them. I thought that would be kind of cool. I was going to do this. This is like a doorway to me. And, but I think them walking right there is more interesting. You know, these beams of light coming this way. We shall see. Okay. I'm going to stamp them later, though, okay? All right. We have two pieces of paper. You'll never find a more accessible, I think, material for masking. It's just a couple pieces of copy paper. All right. Maybe I won't use this one. This one has this black on. Yeah, yeah, I've used this one too much here. Well, let's see. Here, I could use this part right here. Okay, before I start all this off, when I do these beams, I want to vary the width and value of it, okay? The value in terms of light, dark, okay? And I think that gives it a lot of variation and just visual interest when we do it that way, as opposed to everything being completely uniform. And I'll put more ink down by the light source, okay? It's just a cotton ball. And as I move it away from the light source, we'll kind of taper it a little bit, meaning that there's just less of an application of that paint, right? And I call it paint, ink. This is a Hero Arts white pigment ink. I used Color Box before it. Someone told me that the Hero Arts one's a little bit whiter, so I'm going with that. Okay, so we'll do this, and I always have that kind of that central vanishing point right there, okay? All right. I try to vary the beam a little bit, maybe from one part of it. If it's a thick enough beam, I'll try to make it brighter on kind of one side of the beam than the other, if I can. It just kind of brings a little bit of variation and interest into that single beam. See that right there, how it's kind of lighter on, the top half and darker on the bottom because there's more ink on the top. I mean, you can do it the opposite way too. It does, there's no set, formula for this that you have to abide by. Okay, let's see. Yeah, see that? It's a little bit stronger here. As it moves out, it's a little bit weaker. Stronger closer to the light source. Okay, and you can also kind of vary the space in between the beams, okay? Spread them out a little bit. Maybe this one will be just really weak, I don't know. Maybe I'll put a little bit closer to the source. But it could be very subtle, too, like this one right here. See how each beam is a little bit different? This one's probably the lightest. It has the least amount of ink. Okay. if you apply one of these beams and you don't really like it, on this coated paper there is time to just kind of wipe it off and to get rid of it. Especially in glossy, you can do it in glossy cardstock, at least. Not sure on the photo paper, but on glossy cardstock you can even wipe it off completely, even after it dries, if you don't like something. See, I'm always going to this one, kind of designated vanishing point. And it keeps all the beams consistent in terms of all of them emanating from a central area. You can have some beams too kind of, just kind of dissipate. They don't have to kind of fully realize their journey. Let me show you right here. Okay, I'll start it down here, and then it'll just kind of peter out a little bit, or a lot. Okay, let's see if I can do that. Okay, see that right there? I mean, it kind of goes up to that area, but it's very weak right in there. So that kind of variation adds to the visual variety that we're talking about. Okay, let's add in some sharp ones as well, or narrow. Okay. Now, this is starting to dry out and it's starting to look very uniform to me, so a lot of times what I do is I reapply. You go for a couple coats, because pigment ink it always seems to dry darker and more, it's more translucent than when it is applied, even if it looks fairly opaque when applied. I don't know, it just kind of gets a little bit more, like I said, translucent is when you can see through it. Transparent is when you can completely see through it, but it definitely, I don't know, it loses that opacity. Okay, you can see how much lighter this one is, this narrow beam is. I used more ink on it than right there, but I bet you that narrow beam will start to look very, or it'll look closer to these other beams when it, has a few, moments to set up. Okay, and I've mentioned in other videos too, one of the things you can do is you can even bring beams into beams, okay? It doesn't mean it's in the beam, it could mean it's, in front of or in back of, it just looks a little bit more dimensional in terms of space by doing beams within beams. And I would do one, kind of narrower on top of a wider one, just so you can see the variation like that. Okay, see that right there? The narrow one. Yeah, the narrow one. Let's carry it out all the way to the edge. Looks kind of weird ending like that. See how those kind of narrow, real light ones are kind of adding to the, I don't know, the look or whatnot of that, the beam dynamic, maybe. There's so many beams on here, I'm really going to have to play around with opacity dynamics and width width variations, just to keep things kind of a little bit more interesting, if I can. This is a really wide beam that I'm working with, so I'm going to try to kind of heavily, I call it curtain it, where you have kind of a lot more opacity on one side and lightness, just to keep that beam somewhat interesting, or more interesting than it would be, I think, if it was mono value and uniform throughout the whole thing. Okay, so scenery goes right here. See how it's a little bit more opaque on the top and more translucent down towards the bottom. Looks like I imagine myself sitting in like a movie theater or something like that. Kind of one pass doesn't really do it. It gets a little splotchy, so I'm kind of tapping it around just to kind of even out my taps. Because like I said, it does get a little splotchy looking, I can tell. But you just keep tapping it around. This ink, dries fairly, relatively slow, so it gives you time to really manipulate it. Let's do one of these dissipating ones here, where it doesn't quite make the edge. It's kind of implied though, right? Okay. I think when I'm putting this mask over over the top of all these other beams, I'm kind of, there's so much pigment ink on these two masks right here. I'm kind of picking up or dragging off some of the other inks that I've already laid down, so gotta be a little bit careful. Let's go for a double or a stacked beam here in this big one. That looks nice, that beam right there, huh? Maybe we can do that on a couple other ones. It's not to lose track of that vanishing point, almost. Okay, what's up and what's down, huh? All right, that took a long time. There's a lot of beams in there. I mean, it makes for a pretty dynamic piece, though, huh? Okay, now let's go with some different types of imagery in here. Different in terms of the scene here, but not different in terms of what I used yesterday. It's just, like I said, it just comes to show you can practically do anything you want on these pieces here. We'll do a little comparison contrast between something that's maybe not quite so surreal, you know, but something that's, I don't know, I don't necessarily call it traditional, but, you know, in terms of a scene and kind of a formal type of subject matter, you know, trees and whatever, with a, you know, single vanishing point, not two oceans on something like this. But we'll show you how it can all work. Okay, I think I'm going to go with these two people right here. I'm going to wipe off some of that center area pigment ink in here. It's just white anyway. I want to make sure I get a really good impression of these people in here. All right, now I'm going to stamp these two in dye-based ink. And I think I'm going to have them, you can have them walking on the water. Maybe that'd be even more surreal. I think I'm going to have them walking in the water, though, so I'm going to wipe off the bottom of their legs. Okay. Depends how deep you want them to go. You just wipe off the amount of ink accordingly. So if it's real shallow, then you're just getting the bottom of their feet. But we'll kind of have them from about the knees down. Okay. What's up and what's down? I was seeing this part as the top more and this part as the bottom, but I mean, it could be whatever. I'll go for roughly centered. Okay, they stamped out a little bit light, which is kind of cool though. X-Files, huh? Alright, I need to make a little bit of room here on my desk. These big pieces are kind of, I really like working on them these days. I didn't used to work on full page spreads. I even liked 11 by 17, but it's a problem as far as space goes. I guess it's good that I have to kind of keep my area a little bit more tidy than normal. Okay, I'm going to add these trees, and they'll kind of go right at the point right at that same vanishing point. So we'll stay consistent with that. Okay, now I'm stamping this with a Versafine black. And on this paper, they'll dry just fine. Okay. We just had a discussion going on Stampscapes Facebook group about different types of papers and surfaces that Versafine, or just, I don't know, pigment inks in general just don't seem to dry on very well, or at all. And sometimes we have to heat set and spray seal, you know, if we are going to use this really dark ink on this type of certain types of papers. But on this one, this matte or satin paper, it'll dry just fine. It's not dry instantly, but give it a little bit of time, should be just fine. Okay, now I'm changing the height of some of these trees so we can get some variation going. Okay. There's kind of this perspective, you know, discrepancy going on right here, where you wouldn't see these things. These people are kind of upright like that, but the trees are, you know, in high perspective. But it's just kind of going along with the spirit of, you know, the scene here. I'll come on, I'll break this dynamic, these, you know, this straight bar going across here like that. I'll I'll overlap it with a tree. Okay, see what's right there. I think I'm going to come in from the top with this one too. I wasn't quite sure if I was going to use these trees on the top, but I think I am. I think it would just, I don't know. There's something to, I mean, we can call it balance when it works out well, but I don't know, just from a thematic standpoint, I think we just need something up here. For me, it's just, I don't know, it needs another layer up there of something, so this tree will, you know, provide me with just some sort of element, textural element. It's not necessarily because I need trees up there or something like that, you know. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Kind of has this, it's giving me this kind of canopy type of idea in here. Okay, I think that's enough for the Leafless Pine large. And I have the Leafless Pine small that we'll use here. Or, no, Leafless Pine medium, actually. It provides kind of a nice contrast against, you know, these clouds and things like that are in here. And it's full enough of a design where it stands out, but it's not so full that it obscures, you know, what you have already going on down there. So, you know, you want to see what's kind of behind things after you spend all that time, you know, applying them. Okay, I'm overlapping, you know, kind of grouping some of these trees here and there. And I know, this scene is definitely not for everyone. But it is a scene, you know, it's just something that's kind of more abstract. And when you're, you know, when we have these stacked ocean, you know, seaside coves, you know, and if we are to make something out of it, it's not going to be a traditional composition by any means. If you're going to retain them both, I mean, I could have done something where I just darkened in that whole, you know, sky area, you know, and just obscured it, but I wanted to work with those, the impressions in there, so, and not just, you know, eradicate. But that is certainly a technique of I don't know, building a scene, you know, if you don't want something too prominent, then you can obscure it with yeah, additional tone and overlapping, layering of images. Okay, so this is going back to my white ink, and hopefully let's make this area, kind of in that center area, a little bit more indicative of a light source. Okay, so I'm going to try to add some of this white pigment ink in that source, and we'll backlight these individuals. And we'll obscure that horizon line where the light source is a little bit more. Like that. See, it's kind of trying to make it glow in there a little bit more. See this horizon line right there? See, I'm kind of dabbing this down there like that, and having this light come out in here a little bit more. It's just not so defined with a, two pieces of paper masking off a beam, but just kind of more of a soft kind of glow coming out of there. Like Close Encounters of the Third Kind or something like that, when that hatch opens up, and the people are kind of streaming out of there. If you've watched that back in the 70s. Got to be careful around your trees. They're very wet. It's hard to tell. Are these people coming towards you, or are they going into the light? With silhouettes, they could be either one. It's however you see it or interpret it. All right, see that right there? Kind of creates that, I don't know, otherworldly type of feeling right there with some additional tone. Pigment ink. White pigment ink is really fun to use in terms of scenic lighting, and it can really apply a great texture, contrasting texture to the different types of ink applications you've applied. Usually ink applications aren't very soft, okay? They're usually crisp, especially if you're doing outline styles of designs where you're stamping something out and coloring it in. But texture is something that can be so effective in terms of any type of card making. It doesn't have to be scenic stamping either, but texture, having a range of texture is like that is a whole visual language that, if not addressed, is potentially kind of missing out on a really huge opportunity. Texture is such a key factor, when it comes to like designers. When you're doing clothes, you're doing interior design, graphic design, everything. Textures are big. So it's one of those things in rubber stamping. A lot of times it's just not really addressed because we're stamping real crisp impressions everywhere all the time. And that's what we want. We want crisp is good, right? You don't want blurry impressions. And having this just soft element is just really nice to, it's a nice visual tool to employ in a scene. Okay, this is a white paint pen. Speaking about texture, this is a very soft application of light on dark, right? White on dark. Specifically, this is an application of very, very crisp in dark. Can you see that right there? Let me try to zoom in here. I'll try to keep all my work, if I can remember, within the field of view. Gotta be careful about those trees. They're still quite wet. I'm kind of doing these little dots. Sometimes I'll do them on the line striations that are drawn into the design. And as I move into the darker areas, I don't have quite as many highlights, okay? See those highlights down there? How effective they are in kind of describing the surface quality. We're saying that it's reflective, and in this case, maybe it describes this area being a reflective quality. So we're saying, okay, it makes it a stronger statement of this surface quality being water itself because of how shimmery it is. Okay, and I'll add some of this to this portion up here as well. As maybe this is about, could be an illustration of kind of the path of two people, and I don't know, this parallel area, or maybe it could be the past or whatnot. Maybe the world was turned upside down at one time, but we see they're still together and moving forward, or they're coming out of something, depending on the interpretation. Or, who knows, they could be aliens. Okay, so there's just little highlights like that. It creates a little bit of a shimmer, okay? I'm going to do something here with a couple, I was thinking about doing these little glowing little orbs. Do I want to do that down here? Okay, let me add some of this while I'm thinking about it. Let me add a little bit to these clouds. Little highlights on the side of the billows that are facing the light. Okay. In this case, they're not top lit, they're side lit. So you put it on the sides of the billows facing that light. I was going to do these little glowing orbs throughout this piece, but I'm trying to think of it from a textural standpoint if I want to do that. Maybe a couple, okay. I was thinking it, I kind of like, just how it is right now, but I think I want to put a couple of these in here. These are just great little textural elements, okay? See these little dots like that? Right there, kind of some bigger ones kind of off to the side. I'll kind of group them maybe, or group a couple of them. All right, I'm adding a little bit more than I thought I would, but I think it looks okay. Okay, I didn't see these clouds. I forgot about these clouds. So these clouds are somewhat light, so I can put a few little highlights on some of the lighter ones maybe. As a little detail. You can also use like a blue pen too, because this is a blue tone scene, so you can kind of keep it in theme if a white kind of stands out a little bit too much, in terms of contrast, you can use a blue and it's a little bit more subdued. Okay, so let's grab I thought I was done with my white pigment ink, but we added the orbs, okay? And I have my white pigment ink here again, and we have a Q-tip, okay? Cotton swab. I'd go for the natural cotton ones. This is a new one, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen it up, fray it somewhat, okay? If you want a soft application of media, it's just easier to do it with a soft applicator. This is a little bit more tightly wound, okay, but now see how soft this is right here, okay? And we're going to take and get some ink going on here. Gotta get enough of it on there where it's not so blotchy. Okay, but then sometimes it's just built up too much on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to tap this off. It kind of smashes down and smooths out the tip a little bit too. Okay, and it's also removing a lot of the ink because I don't want a lot of ink on there. I want it to be a real light, very light application, very translucent. Okay, so I get these, and I'm not applying blobs of ink on here. I'm just getting a very light little glow going through several taps like that. See that little glowing little sphere? I see people starting to use this type of thing in their pieces on different boards, and I was really happy to see that because I think this is one of those things. It's an easy way to add in that soft element to get that textural contrast working in their pieces to expand the textural range of the overall, and it can be done in a very, very small way with little elements like this. All right, let me adjust the exposure of this video. All right, that's more like the true color. As soon as I start getting a much, when we start off white, there's so much light being reflected back at the camera, but sometimes I forget to adjust the exposure. Okay, so this is, I can get a little bit more detailed. I have some splotches of ink in that space. I can kind of eradicate some of that a little bit more with this. Cotton swab. I can remember the name. I want to say Q-tips, but not every country has, it's a brand, so. All right, let me get a little bit around these figures here. We'll put a little bit of light on these figures like they're backlit. Okay. Okay, I think that looks about right. Let's take a look at this crazy piece. It's certainly, I really like the way this turns out. I mean, you can do these types of things, and we could, maybe I should have done this one kind of in more of a warm tone sunset scheme. I think that would have been maybe even stronger with the yellows and golds and everything like that coming out on there. But, I don't know. I did have blue ink already on there, so it was just easy just to, continue doing that. I spent a little more time on this one than I thought I would. But, I don't know. It was just a fun piece to work on by the time, I don't know, anytime you start doing those light beam types of things, I mean, the piece just turns fun. I don't do that on every piece, but I don't know, sometimes I have to kind of stop myself from doing that on everything because it could be really, I don't know, it just adds this super dynamic element into a scene, so. But, here we go. There's people like that. Kind of cool. Like I said, I think I could have done it this way too, with the people kind of upright, coming out of this like corridor right here that's like this suspended hallway, but I think it could have worked like that. I don't know, you can even do these people like, stamped right here in this water. It's kind of this parallel dimension type of thing, have these figures right here and there they out there. But I don't know, I seem to like it like this, I think. Overall, I think those other ways we could have done that would have been cool too. You could have done just birds or something back in there. That would have been fun, but I don't know. Scrapped a scene. Definitely not a type of scene that I would ever really even think to stamp. I don't think, unless I kind of got in the mindset and I started doing, kind of going for, kind of surrealism or something like that, or science fiction-y types of, this notion of like a book cover or something, then maybe I'd think about it. But otherwise, I'm generally not doing that, I guess we could say. So anyways, just fun stuff, and, I don't know, you can play around with your scenes however you want to do it, no matter what type of thing that you're kind of faced with in terms of a compositional assignment. I think you can come up with something really dynamic and fun, and kind of can learn something along the way in doing so. And maybe you come up with a composition that maybe you haven't done before, haven't seen before, and perhaps may never do again. So, I don't know, on something like this, I think it would be fun to do something in, like I said, those warm, kind of sunsetty colors or something like that, like they're going into the sun. You can have all that type of color striations going on throughout not only one surface down here, and you can do something in the sky, like that, but when you have these two different surfaces like this, I don't know, this goes from something maybe a little bit more traditional in terms of a notion of a scene to something more, I don't know, kind of a, what do they call it? Editorial or whatnot in nature, like maybe you might be illustrating some sort of a story or storyline or something like that. Okay, so anyways, thanks for watching. If you made it this far, thank you so much. And if you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section.